Start now. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to today's panel discussion on the topic of nationalism and feminism in Eastern Europe on behalf of all of the organizers of the Feminis Veritas festival. The host for today will be Agnieszka Wierzcholska, a historian and research associate at the Freie Universität Berlin. First of all, we would like to kindly ask you to take note of the following rules. The discussion will be broadcasted online on our YouTube channel. Therefore, if you do not wish to your video to be shown, please switch off your camera and change your name if you do not wish your name to appear there. Secondly, if you have any questions, please raise your hand using the chat window where you write an X. In this way, we know that you wish to speak. We would like to thank you for spending your evening with us, and we wish you a pleasant experience.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us here today, especially the three panelists. I would just like to say a word that this, maybe you can nod if you hear me because we had some problems with, okay, great. So I'd just like to say that this panel discussion is part of a broader project, which is a project, a feminist festival that takes place this week and takes place online. So if you would like to check out all the other events that are happening, then please look at the website in feminisveritas.be and you will find all sorts of events there. It's a festival organized by 5 students from the Institute for East European Studies at the Freie Universität in Berlin. They have organized it themselves. They had the initiative to do so, and they also had funding from, among others, the foundation of Rosa Luxemburg. So now I would like to welcome our panelists and introduce them shortly. Elżbieta Korolczuk is a sociologist, a researcher, and activist for women's rights and human rights. She works at the Södertörn University in Stockholm, and she also teaches at the Gender Studies Department at the Warsaw University. She has published vastly on topics of gender, of parenthood, of social movement, just to name a few of her publications. For example, The War on Gender from a Transnational Perspective, Gender as Ebola from Brussels, written with Agnieszka Graf, and we will talk about this aspects of this article later, or Explaining Mass Protests Against the Abortion Ban in Poland. She has also co-edited a volume called Pożegnanie z Matką Polką, or Farewell to Matka Polka, which is a volume that actually deconstructs and questions the myth of the Polish mother in its national imagery. Elżbieta, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Dora Kaprálová is a Czech author and journalist. She is writing for Czech print media, online media, and also for radio broadcast. She has received the award of the Czech German Award for Journalism several times. In the last 6 years, she published 3 novels, one of which is translated into German, and I think the second one will be coming out this fall. And Dora Kaprálová also is working with the Institute for Slavic Studies of the Humboldt University, where she writes a blog on Czech literature. Dora lives in Berlin since more than 10 years, I think. So Dora, thank you for joining us in the discussion.
Thank you for the invitation.
Last but not least, Anna Krenz is a performer, an artist, architect, and as she said herself, since the Law and Justice Party came to power in Poland, she also became a political activist. And you can see in the background already some of her artworks from her political activism. Anna Krenz has studied urban planning in Poznań and in London, so part of her work is devoted to the topic of revitalizing the urban space, but she has also conquered the urban space with her political activism, and we will talk about that later. She has received many awards, among others from the Polish Ministry of Culture, but that, I have to say, was before the Law and Justice Party came to power, and from the Berlin Senate. She has been very active in organizing the Black protest in Berlin in solidarity with Polish women protesting and striking against the plan to ban abortion totally in Poland, and we will talk more about her activism. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
We will be talking about for 40 to 45 minutes, and then we will open the round for Q&As for everyone. So if you have questions, as Marketa said, please either write them in the chat or put an X to your name so that then we can unmute you for your questions in the last part of the discussion. Okay, so I would like to start with a personal question. Dora, you have said in one of the introducing videos where you presented yourself and this feminist festival, you said a sentence that struck me. You said, "And I'm a feminist, of course." But I would like to delve more into that and ask the three of you what feminism means to you. How do you define feminist activism for you personally, but also in your professional life? Was there some kind of moment that you can pinpoint that you said, this is the moment where I decided, or I felt I needed to become active in feminist issues in my professional life as a researcher, artist, architect, journalist? Dora, would you like to start?
It's a sophisticated question. I would say that I'm who I am, and I'm writing what I have to write. And occasionally I realize that as older I am, as more often appears motives which I'm somehow confronted, or some situation, or some and like, if you ask me what is feminism for me personally, I would answer that it's just we in Germany you say Mitgefühl. So this feeling, this empathy for every human being. So it's not just about fighting for women. It's fighting for birds, for flowers, for animals, for people who are under some pressure. So this is how I feel it personally, and why it's so important. It's like how to share their life with other people, basically.
Anna, what's your take?
Me? Well, I must say, well, it seems for me it was always it was an intuition. I never called myself a feminist. I just did things which were apparently feminist, and I was lucky. I had never so many situations in my life where I was discriminated because of my sex. However, I always did things which were kind of I was always active in terms of women's rights, and I thought that it's very unfair, and it was natural that I had to do something about it. I come from an artistic family. In my family, we were kind of not really discussing the classical roles. Art was the most important part. That's why I was kind of lucky. I did not have to deal with the sad reality of discrimination in terms of sex. But I think it's just something that comes from the inside. I never gave it a thought. Once, it was many years ago, I did this project in Berlin. After moving to Berlin, I made a project about Polish wives, because I thought it's kind of not only unfair, but it struck me as a strange thing. I saw a website. Of course, it was a kind of a contact website for men from the West and women from the East, Poland. And there was like pictures of different women, and they were being described, and the name, weight, height, hobbies. And there was a little button. For example, when there was a picture of Ivona, let's say Ivona, it was add Ivona to your basket. And then I thought, no, well, wait a minute. How can you add Ivona to your basket? It's so material, it was not right. And then I made a project about selling these wives. I just made it more absurd. People fell for it. And then, however, along with this exhibition and project, Iza Kowalczyk, she's a professor in Poznań at the University of Art, she came And she said, "Oh, you are a feminist." And I said, "What do you mean?" And I was scared. What is she saying? But of course, for me, it comes naturally without name tags, but it seems I was always, kind of. And it's you don't have to be a fighting person. You could do it like, I don't know, like in a soft way. You could go on the street and protest. You can do it at home. You can do it in a different way, like my mom used to do. But it's just a feeling that that the women are as good as men, sometimes even better. No, well, that's in brackets. However, we should all be equal in terms of law and what we can do, and we should all have the same chances, men and women, in that case, and everybody actually the same, all genders, everything. That's more or less it. So it's intuition at heart.
Elżbieta?
Yes, I guess there are two levels of being a feminist. One is how you describe yourself to yourself, in a way, how you feel about the world. Do you see discrimination, for example, as something that is happening? Do you give the situations the names that they deserve? And another level is the fact whether or not you identify as a political activist. So I guess many women have this strong sense of, well, there is something wrong in the world in which I'm muted, right? At the meetings, for example, or I have to do, as a girl, a job for my brothers who just, sit there with a nice cup of tea, and I have to deliver this tea to the table. And I think that a lot of women have this kind of sense that there is something wrong with the world when it turns out that they are the ones who are expected to do most of the job and get least of recognition for that. But there is also this threshold between feeling that and doing something about it. And I think that feminism is, it's not nice to be a feminist in a way, because once you have your eyes open, once you have those glasses, you see that there is so much wrong with this world. And I guess with all of the types of activism is quite similar. Once you become an activist or feel strongly about battered animals, you can't really just turn your head away and say like, well, this doesn't really exist, right? So it is a sense of having to intervene in the world. But in my case, I come from the family which, my grandparents were peasants, my parents were working class, and I'm the first generation which got an education. So it wasn't obvious for me or in any way available as a lifestyle, for example. And I moved to Warsaw to study, and I encountered Agnieszka Graf. I was her first MA student, and she was a person who started, one of the persons who started Manifas in Warsaw, this kind of informal movement to organize manifestations, feminist manifestations, and she's also a scholar. And she invited me to Manifas to organize them. And I feel like, yeah, I kind of belong there. And my mom, when I came back to Białystok, she asked me, like, why did you become a feminist? What does it mean? Like, who made you a feminist? And I'm like, I guess it was you, Mom, actually. She was very conservative. She was against abortion, for example. She was a devout Catholic, but at the same time, she was a very strong person. She always told us, I have two daughters, so she has three girls, that we are worth something, that if we work enough, we can just conquer the world, that there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a woman or a girl, that, we have the same value as everyone else, that we should, take care of ourselves, be independent, have a career. It's very funny. My mother used to say about men or boys, like, there is like half a world of them, just don't get used to them. So that was this kind of, feminism, which didn't really was not really rooted in academia or in activism. It is this kind of, everyday feminism of so many women who understand that their position is not always equal to men, but they fight for themselves. So in that sense, I think that a lot of women are feminist because they fight for themselves, because they see that there is something wrong with the world which is unequal on so many levels, because it's gender, it's race, it's ethnicity, it's religion, it's so many things. But I guess the core of it is to have the courage to give the reality its true name and decide that we are the ones who want to make change.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking while you were talking about this protest of the ordinary women who called themselves ordinary in 2016. Maybe we can come back to that thread later as well. We will have presidential elections in Poland on this Sunday, and we were following an election campaign in Poland that was extremely fueled with hatred against LGBT people, and also this discriminating agitation of the ruling president was echoed in the media worldwide. And shortly after the Law and Justice Party came to power in November 2015, there was an endeavor to ban abortion, which actually led to protests then in 2016. So my next question would be, why this obsession with sexuality, with women's bodies, with reproductive rights, with sexual minorities? How would you judge this connection or correlation between right-wing populism, between rising nationalism also within society, and women's rights, and the role, the image of women within society? Anna, you have been very active in Berlin with organizing protests in solidarity with Polish women. How would you see that correlation between nationalism and women's rights?
Yeah, exactly. That is a good question. And it's actually much more difficult to answer that than I thought at the beginning, because nationalism is nothing really new in Poland. Yeah, it's a way of thinking, and it has been rooted in our history because of history. Nationalism in Poland was born, some 100 years ago, even before partitions. So we all have to actually look at history. Why are things coming up again? Because nationalism, not only in Poland, but in many countries, we can see it in Europe, we can see it in the US, it comes and goes. It depends on the global vibe. So like in America, you can see it very clearly. Sometimes you have Democrats on top, sometimes you have conservatives on top. So it's a wave. Now we see a global wave of nationalism rising again. Well, it has risen already, I would say. And then, of course, you could analyze each country separately. Sure. So that's why if we talk about Poland, that nationalism, it's nothing new. And I think in Poland especially, it comes out of a fear of the stranger, the predator. Before in history, you had partitions and 3 big countries which took over Poland, and they were the enemy. Our identity was taken by strangers, by other countries. So of course people had to fight for the land, for their own identity. That's an important part of history. And then we had the Second World War, not First and Second World War, and communism. And that this nationalism comes, and it's always there as a tool, as means of defending your own identity. The question would be, why is anti-feminism so much involved in, why is it such a marriage of nationalism and anti-feminism? In many cases, there's a role of the church, which we see very clearly, okay, the Christian religion, Catholic religion is not very women friendly. We can say that as the religion itself, and of course the church as an institution. It's not women friendly. So you always have these players, the church, nationalists, and conservative parties. Why does it come together? Well, because it's one system of similar values. And even if you look at, let's look at the period after the war. People in Poland were afraid that Nazis will come back. Of course, it was a logical fear that they had. I have many documents from that time and magazines from that time, and I actually read it in my free time. I'm interested what did people say exactly in that historic time, not what we think today, what they thought. And they were really scared of it. So of course they turned to the church, and the church took that role of the defender. Yeah. So after the war, then the church was defending the values and the Polish identity. So people turned to the church, not in the times of Solidarność in the 80s, that too, but it was already a different period. So the church was present. And of course, with the church, there come these traditional values, the family, no abortion. But then again, then we had communism who were kind of more strangely open to, and the communism was kind of, and socialism was strangely open to women's rights. You can see the same situation in Germany. Germany, when it was divided into East and West, to be honest, the East German women had more rights. They were more emancipated than the Western women. You can still see that today in German feminist movements. There are these differences, they are still there. So women in Poland and probably other Eastern European countries, they were emancipated. They could work, they could have career and children, and they were kindergartens, and they could do abortion, even if we talk about abortion as a symbol of that free choice. And then again, suddenly nationalism, I think people just did not, when the communism fell, yeah, the wall came down, and the 90s came in, and this wild capitalism suddenly set in. People changed their minds. Some of them followed capitalism, some of them did not. But then I think it must have had something to do with the work, with global market, different values, consumerism, individualism. So that was pushed to the limit. And then again, you see now the return of conservative values. Why? It's all over Europe. It's all over the world. Poland is not the only country. So we have to find out, why is that? I'm trying to think about it. And I see the only reason is the church, the fear of the unknown again, maybe the refugees that's what we see in Germany, the fear of refugees with growing party AfD. I think, I don't know, why is that happening? I was reading today a lot of, actually the right-wing magazines, conservative magazines from people who are, Polish people who are connected to the conservative party Confederation. And there was one article, it was written by a woman about feminism. And it was so interesting because I think because we see that these conservative movements in a different way. I think we see them as we want them to be. But that woman wrote a totally emancipated article about feminism, and it was very progressive. I don't like the values of conservative people. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying sometimes we should be more open to, we should be more open to things other, even conservatives say, to learn about them more, to know who they are. And I simply don't really know. And then if you see Kaczynski in 2016, when he said about making abortion illegal again. I think it was him, but it was also ultra-Catholic groups like Ordo Iuris. Kaczynski himself, I think for him it's not a good topic to talk about. Of course, when Black protest was in 2016 and we won that battle, you could say we won a battle, we didn't win the war, but Kaczynski backed off. Maybe he was scared of women on the streets, maybe, but I'm kind of not sure if he is himself, if he's so radical. In the recent interview, he said, yeah, he's of course against abortion, but for him, it's not a political issue. So for who is it? Of course, for ultra-Catholic groups, for really conservative parties like Konfederacja, Ordo Iuris, that group, Kaja Godek. But because abortion has always been a subject in difficult times, in times of change in Poland. I remember it as a kid. Sometimes when there was something happening, there was word abortion. And I used to ask my mom, why are they talking about it again? And it was in these important moments that came to the political debate, abortion. Why this? I don't know. Why is that a subject? Because that is the sex game between men and women, where men at power, because we have more men at power, they still try to control women. And it's so symbolic, but it's also so real. It is a real problem. And maybe I'm talking chaotically, but so we have not only Kaczynski, we have not only peace, but we also have other forces like the church who are pushing towards abortion ban. And I think they are different groups, but they are connected, and we have to see it with open eyes, and we have to see these connections. It's not only peace, that would have been too simple. It's not that simple. It's way more difficult. It's way more complicated and more dangerous, because the people with conservative opinions who want to limit women's rights, they are in very many different places. Wherever you turn, you can find them. And so abortion is a ball that these boys play. Unfortunately, it's about women's bodies, and I don't really like that these boys or these old men play that ball, political ball, but this right for abortion is the only right of a human being, which is this right, or abortion is one of those things that touches your body, your soul, your emotions, your body. There is no other thing that would really go so deep into a human being, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
We have to. You
Yeah.
will have the chance to talk, but I want to ask also the other.
Yeah. Go on. Yes.
Elżbieta, you were also involved in the protests in Poland. Where would you see this connection between rising nationalism, also right-wing populism, and women's bodies?
I think that what we know for now, there are several several trends which are parallel. On the one hand, there are quite important changes in party politics. If you look at research, sociological research, such as, for example, the book Cultural Backlash by Norris and Engelhardt, they are really showing that during the last 30-40 years, cultural issues, cultural cleavages has become the most important dividing line between the parties. The same for Europe, the same for United States. So as you can see in the Polish context, before the elections, there are no real discussions about the model of financing healthcare. We don't really have a discussion about, well, how to introduce really ecological ways of dealing with the air pollution. The most heated debates, the most important divisions are around cultural issues, abortion, definition of marriage, definition of family, and so on and so forth. So this is one element. The other element is the aftermath of the crisis in 2008, and basically the crisis of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism understood as free market, but also neoliberalism as a socio-cultural phenomenon, right? Neoliberalism, which says everyone for themselves. You can do it if you want to. American dream, yes, you can do it, right? In all of the countries, in the United States, but also in Europe, in Poland as well, the productivity of people do not match the pay they get. So basically, we are getting poorer, even though we are working harder. And this is especially, I guess you see it as young people, you don't really see a bright future in front of you. You see the growing precarity in the labor market. The labor market is really changes. And at the same time, the reaction to the 2008 crisis was really, really important. What has happened? A lot of money went to the banks and very little to the people. So that was the moment where I guess there has been a lot of reactions today to that, like Occupy Wall Street, for example, which emerged throughout the world. And it didn't really change anything. So quite a lot of people feel exhausted, feel hopeless, feel that the future is grim, or at least precarious, unstable, and they are seeking a sense of stability. So what the conservatives have to offer is a sense of stability rooted in something that is, of course, created like traditional family. Are all traditional families happy? Do they provide stability? Not really, but we have this sense of belief that when everything else does not work, when the market does not work, when the state does not provide, the only thing that we can count on is the family, are the people who are around us, right? Another important element of this change is deals with the emotions. I guess the conservatives are really, or ultra-conservative organizations are really good at harnessing people's anger, anxiety, a sense of disillusion with the politics. They're really good at, actually they are taking, they tend to take over the concepts such as gender equality. They use this word. They use it quite a lot. They say, well, we are the ones who are really working for against discrimination, right? Because in the family, women are never discriminated, right? True traditional families are the places where women will be happy. But they are very, very skillful in using words such as equality, discrimination, helping people, and so on. Another important element is the fact that today, ultra-conservatives or conservatives are rarely so openly neoliberal as they were, for example, in the United States in the 80s and 90s, right? You had what you had there what Wendy Brown, the American scholar, calls the American nightmare, the convergence between neoliberals and neoconservatives, right? Who all wanted small state, no support for single families, for example, total control over women's bodies, and so on. Today, conservatives, as in Poland and in, let's say, Hungary, you can see it very clearly, they are really providing some social security, like the 500 zloty for each child monthly. Whether it is a good social policy, I don't think it is, but it is a way to connect their view or their vision that they want to promote, that they're supporting the real people, right? The people, meaning those who have been abandoned, marginalized by liberals and leftists, the hardworking, traditional, and so on and so forth people. So their vision is quite, I would say, coherent, right? They are talking about family and they provide for the families. And I was at the World Congress of Feminists last year in Verona. It was a huge, huge event organized by ultra-conservative networks from all over the world. Americans, Hungarian, Brazil, everyone was there, France, Italy, and so on. And I was quite amazed that even the Americans, such as Brian Brown, who is the head of the World Congress of Feminists, and who in the United States, he basically really tries hard to reverse the marriage equality. Here in the European context, he was like all about family, that Poland and Hungary do so much to help, you know, women and children and families, and they organize kindergartens and they give money to women and so on and so forth. So I was like, well, I mean, why don't you fight for universal maternal leave in United States? You don't have it there. But I guess we have to really see that now they really do, they function on different levels. On the level of emotions, on the level of politics and social policies, on the level of providing a vision of the future. And I really think that both the leftists and the liberals have been affected by a sense of exhaustion. That because some of the politics that we supported and offered did not really work, we lost the sense of, we lost faith, in the future, right? And we lost the fight. So in that sense, there are a lot of elements which create this this new configuration. And in Poland, of course, it is a bit stronger because we have the Catholic Church as a political institution. We have a strong sense of not really trusting the state and have a lot of faith in the family, in the private sphere, and so on. So in that sense, yes, we see it in Poland strongly, especially with those homophobic campaign before the elections. But I really see that those elements are present everywhere. And it's quite canny how they do it, like with Alternative für Deutschland, yes? They on the one hand, they are saying we are really progressive because we have a gay woman as our leader and we are pro anti-discrimination and so on. On the other hand, if you look at what they actually do, they do not support any progressive anti-discriminatory legislation, and they are quite willing to support legislation which would actually make the access to reproductive health, for example, harder for women. So, I mean, they're really cunning how they do it, but we have to look at what they do, not only at what they say.
Thank you. Dora, I think it's almost exactly a year ago that in the Czech Republic there have been massive protests, the biggest one since the Velvet Revolution, against Andrej Babiš, and who came to power as a Eurosceptic and a populist. And I wanted to ask you about the situation for women and in the Czech Republic, and what do you think point of view do feminists still have to do and are mostly fighting against?
I would say that this populistic politics is one thing. The other thing is that in a new generation, I mean, women about 30 years writing to a little bit left side newspaper are quite clever, fighting against all social discrimination in Czech Republic, and it goes straightly against this ultra conservative and capitalistic vision of Andrej Babiš. I'm not sure if it's not just a very subjective opinion of mine, and maybe I'm living in a social bubble of similar thinking people. That's what I'm always asking to myself. I would say that it was a really big step in Czech Republic. Just now it's a little bit sleeping time, but comparing to Hungary, for example, or Poland too, I think that there is still some healthy base. The direction is quite pessimistic, or I see much hope, but I feel that there is quite a strong movement of feminism in Czech Republic, and that especially young generation of journalists try to do what the best work. So I'm appreciated for this.
Thank you. I have many more questions to you, but I think we are running out of time, and I would like to give the opportunity to the other participants to ask Q&A. And I think now it's, Marketa's turn to unmute the ones who want to ask questions. So I will give over to Marketa or Valerie. And please have patience. We will get there.
Everyone feels so depressed that we don't want to hear anything more.
Valerie, maybe you can tell me if is there a technical problem or with the unmuting, or are there no questions? Because I have more in store, so I can, go on.
I'm sorry, I'm with you right now.
Great.
Yeah, so if anyone has any question, please just message an X into the chat window and we will unmute you so that you can pose your question.
There's the first one, and we're waiting.
Yeah, hi. Sebastian from the Institute of East European Studies. Since we have two people from Poland and Czech Republic here with us, I want to ask you whether you can say something about how the situation is with, let's say, women pushing for certain positions in power and maybe making a case for, or making a feminist case once in power. Is there a movement? Are there people, women, active in party politics, in positions of power that are, let's say, pushing a feminist agenda? I just would be interested in hearing something on that topic. Thank you.
Agnieszka, you want to go first?
Yeah, yes, definitely. There is, actually, there are several groups which are working with this. On the one hand, we have Congress of Women, which is an organization established in 2009, mostly by elite women like entrepreneurs, activists also, but professors, academics, some politicians as well. And one of their goals was to create a platform for promoting women who want to be active on the political scene, and for example, through giving them space, but also giving them some know-how. And actually it worked both for local elections, like municipal elections, and then also national parliamentary elections. So they were supporting the women who wanted to get into positions of power. And some of those efforts were successful. On the second example are the women who came into the parliament during the last parliamentary elections, who joined the left, and quite a few of them were activists active in the Polish women's strike or in the different types of Black protest networks. And actually, quite a lot of them were active on the local level, but they weren't quite, well, ready or thinking about politics. And I guess this moment of crisis of the Polish politics made them more willing to enter the race, and a couple of them are now in the parliament in the Polish Left Party. So in that sense, and there is a lot of discussions around that women should get more power and they should have more possibilities. But in this presidential elections, we had, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole mess of the Polish presidential elections, because we almost had elections on the 10th of May. And, you know, it was like 2 days before the elections, and I didn't know if I'm going to go to elections or not, how they are going to organize that, because they are such a mess, and they didn't, so they postponed it. And in the first round of almost getting to the elections, the biggest oppositional party have a woman who was the candidate, presidential candidate. And there are a lot of discussions because she wasn't really supported by her party. They really didn't have an idea how to make a message which would connect her femininity with the issue of power and with the position of the president. They didn't really invest in her, and she herself wasn't like a very strong, outgoing personality, so she probably would be a better candidate in the sort of more quiet times than today. And finally they replaced her with a guy, of course. So now we have 5 or 6 men, most in their 40s, 50s, looking very similar in their suits, running in the elections. So I guess the problem is that usually, and there are studies to show that if you have a crisis, it doesn't really end in preference for women in electoral process, which is the pity. We'll see how it goes, but so far, we'll see. Comme ci, comme ça.
Anna, you have also created this Botschaft der Polinnen, the embassy for the Polish women, which I might connect to the question. So maybe you could also say something something about that. We have another question, so please make your answers short.
Good. Just just adding one sentence to Elżbieta. Yeah, it's true. We have 11 presidential candidates, all men, and this woman, which was there, she's not there anymore. My question is, why is there no other woman? We have 38 million people in Poland. Half of them is women, more or less. So that would be, I don't know, 15. Why isn't there any woman who would like to be a president and the candidate? I don't understand. It's just the same as Poland. 38 million people. They cannot find 11 guys who could kick the ball and have a good football team. No, and there is no woman who would like to be a president. I don't understand. Why not? And some
you know what? Sorry, did you see the Oscar Gala this year?
No.
You should see this part. There was this very funny host who said like, "Oh, I would like to now read the nominations to the best director, I think." And she said like, "Oh, I would like to do what they did, but I don't have the balls."
Yeah.
And of course they were all men, so probably don't have the balls.
Yeah, but now it's time for
interruption.
Yeah, but it's maybe it's not about having balls. It's about having, how you say it in English, eierstock, jajniki in English. How is it?
Ovaries.
Ovaries.
The power of the ovaries.
It's the new balls. However, I'm wondering, why isn't there a woman candidate? Okay. However, Embassy of Polish Women. It is true. It is an artistic project which I had in my mind since some years. But now it's got a form, and it is an artistic project. It's an installation, physical installation in space, based on a previous project about Polish women, where I was selling Polish women. It's the same construction physically, but it is actually also a word game, because Botschaft der Polinnen in German, the word Botschaft, it's not only embassy, but it means also a message. So I wanted to have a place, physical space, but also a metaphysical space where women's voices would be heard. Not only women's voices, it could be because anybody could be a Botschafterin, a Polish Botschafterin, man, woman, anybody of any gender could become a Botschafterin. It's a German It's a German word for embassy person. And it's an installation, it's true, it is installed in the Haus der Statistik in Berlin for a week, in a little room. Everybody can come in there and see the exhibition of, it's a timeline exhibition of, it's a documentation of 5 years of protests, not all of them, but I posted pictures of different photographers who took photos of protests since 5 years. And it's a temporary installation. It's also mobile. It will appear in different places in the next months, because the Polish embassy, the real one, the one ran by Wolfgang, the agent, excuse me, by Szłębski, the ambassador. Well, it's a building which is only now open to people who like peace party. I used to be invited to the Polish embassy many years ago. We all were invited. We went to picnics, but not anymore. Now it's only for fans of peace. And my embassy is open to everybody. And it's an art installation. Why not? Nobody can forbid us to have a embassy of women, Polish women. Why not? Why not? It's a political, artistic project, and I'm inviting everybody to drop in and join us after summer holidays. Of course, we will be doing more things in the embassy. Botschaft der Polinen.
Thank you, Anna. Dora, would you like to say something about the situation in the Czech Republic?
I just wish that we would have in politicians somebody who is now in Slovak politician, I mean President Čaputová, because in Czech politics it's absolutely masculine system, and it's a funny disproportion, and I didn't realize it before that actually we have a lot of very good women journalists, but nobody wants to go to high politician. It doesn't work like in Poland. Or that's what I know. I'm a writer.
We have 2 more questions. Anna Novikova, you are the next one, and maybe we'll collect both questions at a time, and then we give. This will be this last round. Anna, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm now Anna Novikova from Greifswald, where actually I work on my research which actually deals with questions of gender and LGBTIQ in Eastern Europe. So actually I have here 3 questions. It's really interesting discussion. So the first question is, when you speak about the Polish government's approach to feminism, would you say it's a bit slightly differs from the approach to LGBTQ, because sometimes very often they're coming together actually, like in a couple. Always it's feminists and gays, etc. And the second question is the Black protests. What happened actually now in April? Do you feel that there were any success? Like, how do you feel the impact of it? And the third question is regarding COVID situation now, whether you see any impact again from COVID to the whole situation in Poland.
And before you answer the question, I would also like to read a question which came from someone in the chat room. And the question was, is there a danger that the democracy and women's rights in Poland will be eroded to the same degree as in Hungary? So this is another question about Poland. And I think these are the last questions. And so I would like the panelists for their last word, so to speak, by answering these questions. Who would like to go first? Elżbieta?
Yeah, sure. I think that it's quite interesting to observe how the opposition to gender, the anti-gender campaigns evolved. Because I think that, and I just finished a book together with Agnieszka Graf, we are now collaborators and friends, a book on right-wing populism and anti-gender campaigns. And it's quite interesting. It's like a new wave of opposition to gender, which includes issues concerning LGBT rights, but also issues connected to, for example, anti-Muslim attitudes, right? So there's like connecting all those dots. And in the Polish case shows that much right, like Anna has shown, that the Polish state, represented by Law and Justice, is conservative, but they are not really investing into this issue. So this is more like ultra-conservative organizations in the church put pressure on them to bring certain types of discourses or to choose certain types of solutions. And when I started to analyze this new strange wave of opposition to gender in 2012, we had the question of the Istanbul Convention, so the protecting women from gender violence. We had the question of abortion, and we have the question of sex education. And of course, the issue of LGBT rights was there, but it wasn't the most prominent. So when in 2016, this proposal to introduce total ban on abortion failed because of the mass resistance of Polish women, over 200,000 Polish women went to the streets. It was really a huge mobilization. As you said, Anna, Law and Justice sort of backed off. And they tried again, and April protests, it's sort of, it's like a vicious circle. In 2017, in 2018, this year, each year, ultra-conservative organizations supported by the church are submitting some civic law proposal. Civic law proposal means, as in many Eastern European countries, you have to have 100,000 signatures of people who support the proposal, and then you submit it to the parliament. And each time they fail because of the huge opposition. So in that sense, I think that they really felt that they need to change the strategy, because once they try to go head on and struggle and sort of, fight Polish women, they're unsuccessful. But we have much higher level of homophobia than we have the level of misogyny, right? And it's just smaller group, right? So this year, Law and Justice used the already functioning, the already existing homophobic language used by ultra-conservative organizations to try to polarize the society even more. So it's like moving towards sort of from issues which were not very successful to issues which at least they believe might be more successful in polarization, in creating this sense of moral panic and so on and so forth. So there is a connection between them, but they are really skillfully moving from one issue to another. And I guess COVID-19 is important in regarding two issues at least. One is the fact that because there is so much attention focused on the issue of COVID-19 and people are really worried about their health and so on, we don't really have so much access to what is going on behind the scenes. And because those ultra-conservative organizations are by now quite well institutionalized within the state structures, within the state institutions, they are really skillfully trying to, push here and there, trying to achieve what they want without people knowing it, without steering attention. So for example, in the fourth version of of legislation, which is called the Shield, which is ideally shielding Polish people from the effect of COVID, we have, for example, a small change in the legislation, which would effectively mean that people who help women getting an abortion should really face, in the first instance, they should face jail. Because before that, they could face jail, but they could also get another type of punishment, right? So it's like a teeny tiny detail, which sort of, changes the context, changes the institutional practice, and changes the situation. So in that sense, and of course, COVID also really affected the possibility for people, for activists to protest, right? So, for example, women who were protesting in April, queuing in front of the parliamentary buildings, or going by car, you know, with slogans and so on in the center of the cities, like in Warsaw, they were fined, quite a lot of them. So there is a lot of oppression. There is a lot of, I would say, legal harassment. There is a lot of police harassment towards the activists, under the pretense that they are endangering other people's health. So to the question whether there is danger that women's rights will erode, yes, there is this danger. And I think that this danger is everywhere. It's like, you know, in the United States, it seems that Roe versus Wade solved the problem. And now you have 6 states who actually limited the access to legal abortion because it was named as unnecessary procedure. So in that sense, we all have to really be careful and really look at what's going on in politics, whether you are in Germany, whether you are in Sweden. Sweden is always seen as this, you know, wonderful country where you have civil society, very active politicians, liberal, you know, feminists everywhere. Actually, Sweden is the hotbed of anti-feminist online activism in Europe. It's a place where a lot of those organizations, those groups online function. And it's a place where quite a lot of activities of those ultra conservative organizations are going on. They're, of course, not saying that they will, you know, try to take control over women's bodies, but they are saying, for example, that gender studies are dangerous and they are not productive enough, or they are not scientific enough. So they are really trying to undermine the legitimacy of gender studies. So we have to be very careful, no matter where we are. Agnieszka is muted, unfortunately.
Now I'm unmuted again. Dora, maybe you can say something about your experience from Czech Republic.
Basically, I can talk just from the perspective of writer, because I'm not a big activist, but what can I say? Of course, we have to have open eyes, and I'm saying I'm not a good speaker. I'm talking with my stories, so I'm trying to move the world in better direction, let's say. Nevertheless, that it sounds so pathetic and ugly, by stories which are quite realistic and which make me fear, and I go from the fear to writing. So this is my way how I can also join this discussion about feminism in Middle Eastern Europe.
Because we're almost at the end of discussion, I just wanted to lead your attention to that Dora will have a reading within this festival, I think in 2 days, if I'm not mistaken, about your story from the book Islands, which was translated into German. And now, Anna, you have the last word.
Me? Mm-hmm. Okay. Me, the last word. Oh, okay. Okay. Then maybe I just wanted to say that, that it is actually really what is happening in the world. Not only with, it's not about COVID, but all these movements which we see in politics and social life and culture, they are connected because the global market is connected, and borders are, well, they exist because of COVID, which showed us that things may change very quickly, that you may not travel somewhere or you may not really go beyond, but we are connected, and we should always try to see beyond the borders, that things are connected, especially the right-wing organizations. We have to keep our eyes open, and really, I think it's very important to be aware. They could be, well, not everywhere. It's not a conspiracy theory. That's not what I'm saying. It's just for all of us to be aware, but also respect people who might be these ordinary people, like Elżbieta mentioned about the family situation or what you experience, that regular women are actually also heroes in many ways. It doesn't really, you don't have to be a fighting activist to achieve many things, because the world is big enough. So we have to have space for feminists which stand on the streets and demand something, because that's what happened 100 years ago and 200 years ago, that these women had to go to the streets and fight for the rights. So we need that today as well. But we also need writers, we need writers who will write books and articles, and we need to publish things about women, because women do not really exist in history unless we write about them. If you see in Wikipedia and encyclopedia, most places are taken by men, but there were women also. And I think it's like, if we don't know what to do in life, we could actually write about women and give them their place in history. Why not? Her story, so there are still many things to be done, and on different levels, and each level is important. Even like my friends, they are helping Polish women who come to Berlin to have a safe abortion. That is still happening, and it's very important as well. It's something that it's not in the media of obvious reasons, but these people do it. And it's even with COVID, it still happens, and it's still important. It might get worse if in Poland doctors, I think this bill was passed about klauzula sumienia, how you say it?
Yeah, conscious clause.
Exactly. It passed, no? Didn't it? Yeah. So the doctors may not, they don't have to tell you, if the doctor will not make you an abortion, he doesn't have to tell you where else you can do it. No? So, or they can say, I will not do it because my religion doesn't allow me. So so it may be even worse. That's why we have to be aware, and we have to act on different levels. Each level and each place is important to make all people equal, and especially, well, women, because we are not worse. We are as good as men, to put it so simple.
A wonderful last word. But then again, we have another question for Elżbieta, and I would like to give her the opportunity to answer. And the question was, how can the left parties change their tactics effectively to counter this right's homophobic and anti-feminist rhetoric? So, Elżbieta, the last word will be yours.
Thank you. I was really inspired by the story of the Irish activists who managed to, as you might know, push towards repealing the 8th Amendment in the Constitution. What they told me was that usually as activists who have certain vision, we think that here we are, here are our adversaries, and here in the middle are people. And they're like, you can move them by telling them this and that, they will shift their position, left or right. What they have learned through research, through talking to people, that actually most people feel like, here is the feminist, let's say, movement. Here is the anti-feminist movement, and they are somewhere there. They are not really engaging in this discussion. And I guess part of the reason why is that it is getting ugly. I mean, the kind of, hate speech that now is used by even mainstream politicians is unbearable. So I really don't blame people for feeling that. But what they did was to engage people into discussion. They organized meetings, and they didn't tell them what they should think. They asked them, what do you think, right? And I guess listening to people and understanding that people are rarely coherent, right? Like my mom, she loved the fact that I am an activist. She was really supporting me as a person who was, talking publicly about women's rights. But she was very anxious about, for example, the fact that I am promoting, access to abortion, because for her it was against her deeply held beliefs. So I think that we really have to understand how people feel, understand how they cling to certain beliefs which we might not really support or identify with. But if we give them space, if we give them voice, they can support political solutions which are not 100%, on par with their beliefs, but which might be good to other people, right? So in that sense, I would really encourage the left, first of all, to abandon the jargon. We really have to talk in a way that people engage in and understand. We really have to understand that people might have very disparate beliefs. They are not, identities are like disco balls, right? There are many elements. And depending on the situation, we might choose one position or the other. It's like, asking people if they are for access to abortion. If you ask them, do you think all women should have access to abortion? They will be like, I don't know, should they? Maybe not. If you ask them, do you think that your daughter or your friend should have an access to abortion if they are really in a pregnancy that they don't want to carry on with, that they don't feel in any way prepared for? Do you think that this person should have access to it? Then it's like 69% of people in Poland says, yes, I understand it. Yes, I would say yes in this situation. So we really have to understand how emotions work. And it's the same with homophobia. I think that, I have a lot of family in the countryside, grandmother who's, she learned how to write when she already had kids and the kids went to school. But she's like, well, I don't know about gays, but are they good people? If they are good people, why should we bother with their, whether they are gay or not gay? It's like, why should we talk about it even, right? So I guess we really have to, we have to be able to tap into this reservoirs of tolerance, which might be available in really, not so obvious spaces. And we have to understand that people might not share our beliefs 100%, but they might be on our side in creating a world which is more just, which is more, in solidarity with each other, which is less horrible and less alienating. And I guess this is our work for each and every one of us, to do these everyday conversations, to do those little things. If you can sing, record a song. I did it even though I don't know how to sing. you can write, you can create something with your friends, like, make it available through internet, right? You can open up a small space on the internet, on Facebook, for example, for people who would like to talk about it, right? To have those spaces which are not only bubbles, but which are wider. And each and every effort leads us to the place that we want to get in, right? So let's do it.
Thank you, Elżbieta. This was a really upbeat, because it offers solution, an upbeat statement of yours, and it's a very nice last word. I'd like to thank all of the three panelists, Dora, Elżbieta, and Anna, for being here with us, for sharing your views on these topics, and also for your activism, if it is in writing, performance or in research. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the organizers of this meeting, which is Marketa, Natalia, Katja, Valerie, and Elżbieta, the 5 students from the Institute of East European Studies. Thank you so much for bringing us together, and good luck with the festival.
Thank you so much.
I hope that you all will look at the website, and thank you for all the participants, listeners, and all your questions. At the end, let's do it. I'll repeat Elżbieta's last words, and thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, really. Are we? What do we do now?
Probably.